The town of Hill Valley always felt like it was holding its breath. Even when the sun was out and children pedaled their bikes past the cafe and the clock tower stood proud above Main Street, there was a stillness about it, like something had been paused a long time ago and forgotten. On October 26, 1985, a boy named Marty McFly never showed up to meet his friend, Doc Brown. And that single absence unraveled 1,000 tangled fates. Doc Brown was the first to feel it. He stood at the Twin Pines Mall parking lot, gripping the remote in one hand, pacing beside the DeLorean, his eyes frantic with anticipation. But Marty never came. He waited beneath the eerie orange glow of the parking lot lights, checking his watch every minute, mumbling under his breath. The dog, Einstein, barked restlessly, sensing something was wrong. Eventually, Doc lowered the remote and stared into the cold metal of the time machine he had spent decades building. The silence was louder than any explosion. Across town, Marty slept, but not in his room. He had missed Doc's call the night before. His alarm had malfunctioned. His skateboard had rolled under the bed. By the time he woke up, the morning had already swallowed his chance. In this version of reality, Marty never knew just how much hinged on his presence. He didn't run. He didn't steal the plutonium-powered DeLorean. And he never went back to 1955. Life simply went on, but not in the way it was supposed to. Without Marty's intervention in the past, his father, George McFly, never punched Biff Tannen, never stood up for Lorraine, never realized the courage that lay dormant in his spine. He remained the soft-spoken pushover who cowered at the sight of Biff. And Biff Tannen, well, he only grew louder. Biff became a small-town tyrant, running his auto-detailing business with swagger, harassing Lorraine, who had once again married George out of resignation, not romance. Their marriage was cold, stale, held together by old photographs and the inertia of regret. Marty grew up around that. He noticed the tension at dinner, the way Lorraine stared at the television, glassy-eyed, wine in hand, the way George nervously laughed at every joke Biff made at his expense. It was as though everyone had been programmed to forget what love and ambition looked like, including Marty. At school, Marty was still a dreamer, still carried his guitar, still wanted to make something of himself, but without that jolt of purpose, without seeing his own parents fall in love again, without understanding what sacrifice and second chances meant. He never found the fire to chase it. He auditioned for a talent show and was told he was too loud. He stopped playing as often. After that, Jennifer tried to encourage him, but even she sensed the weight on him, a pressure he couldn't name, like a life unlived was sitting just behind his shoulder, whispering that he was meant for more. One afternoon in November, Marty walked past the abandoned garage that once belonged to Doc Brown. Overgrown with weeds, the gate rusted, the windows covered with old newspapers. Inside, the DeLorean still sat under a thick tarp, dust blanketing the contours of its futuristic design. Marty had no memory of what it truly was, no knowledge of time circuits, no memory of Libyan terrorists, no thrill of speeding across the mall parking lot at 88 miles per hour. But something drew him there, like a forgotten dream that only returned in fragments. He pulled back the tarp one day and stared at the strange vehicle. Even then, he didn't know why he was trembling. Doc Brown hadn't been seen in weeks. The town whispered about him, said he was crazy, said he had vanished. But in truth, he was still there, living like a ghost in the shadows of his own broken dream. Without Marty to help him test the DeLorean, without anyone to prove that time travel was real, Doc had buried his ambition beneath the floorboards. He watched the world age and knew that somewhere, somewhen, things had gone wrong. He kept a journal, pages filled with alternate theories, timelines, moments that never occurred. And one page, always blank, the day he had expected Marty to arrive. Years passed. Marty eventually moved out, tried college, dropped out after a semester, tried forming a band, but gave up after their first failed gig. His life was not bad, but it was small, ordinary, like someone had turned down the volume on his potential. One day he found an old camcorder in the attic. Inside was a single, unlabeled tape. Curiosity led him to play it. The footage was grainy, shaky, but unmistakable. There was Doc Brown, wild white hair, lab coat flapping, standing beside a glowing DeLorean, and there was Marty, his own younger face, on screen. He was watching himself. The tape showed him running toward the car, screaming about terrorists, jumping inside, disappearing into a flash of light. The screen crackled, static. Marty stared at the frozen image of his own face from a moment he had never lived. His hands trembled, his breath caught. Something was wrong with time. And now, he knew it. He returned to Doc's garage, this time, not as a curious boy, but as a man with questions. He found Doc in the basement, half mad, talking to equations on the wall. When Marty walked in, Doc froze. "You weren't supposed to remember," he whispered. "But time, it always finds a way." The two sat for hours, piecing together the story that should have been. Doc explained everything. The letter he had written in the past, the lightning strike, the enchantment under the sea dance, George's punch, Lorraine's kiss, the future that had been rewritten because of Marty's bravery, and how all of it was erased. Because Marty never showed. Doc handed him the key, the ignition for the DeLorean. Marty stood before the time machine once more, the flux capacitor humming, 88 miles per hour waiting in the distance. But something stopped him. He realized this wasn't about going back to fix things. It was about choosing who he wanted to be, now, without needing to rewrite history. He stepped away from the car. "Sometimes, the past doesn't need changing," he said. "Sometimes the future does." With that, he walked out of the garage, not into a time machine, but into a new version of himself. He picked up his guitar again. He called Jennifer. He told George he loved him. He helped Lorraine find her old painting set in the attic. And Biff? Well, without anyone left to intimidate, he eventually just faded into the background. Hill Valley never knew the story of what almost happened, but they felt it. In the way the clock seemed to tick louder, in the way the wind shifted when Marty walked by, in the feeling that something had been lost and then found. Doc Brown eventually disappeared for good. Some say he built a new machine, others say he traveled to a place even time can't follow. But every so often, on stormy nights, the townspeople say they hear a strange electric hum, like a DeLorean engine whispering across the sky. And Marty, he lives a good life, a quiet life. But when the wind blows just right, he swears he can almost remember the sound of lightning and a voice calling his name from across the decades. The story never happened, and yet it always will, because time, as Doc once wrote, isn't a line. It's a loop, and somewhere out there, Marty McFly is still running toward the future.